I'm very glad to be here because when we founded Depot Basel in 2011, we didn't know where it's going to bring us. We had really no idea. And that's a kind of interesting idea when you found a group of people that you really believe that you want to create an alternative context for the ongoing discussion about design. And I'm going to answer the question from the beginning because rarely, very rarely, someone's asking, why are you called Depot? You know, I mean, of course, the connotation to Basel is there because we're in Basel, but the Depot is because we used to be in a grain silo, and that's how Depot Basel started. But to tell you a little bit more, oh God, I really put this. I didn't know that I put this jumping effect into it. When we started having this huge grain silo of 850 square meters, and that was actually the moment when I met Vera Sacchetti and Kimberly Burks that visited me while I was sitting there looking at the exhibition. We have this huge silo. It was interesting to see how a lot of people were really interested in this alternative context. And we knew that 850 square meters is tricky, because what's going to happen with the press? They're going to say, you're a fair, you're a festival, or something like that. Are you showroom? Are you selling? No, we're not selling. Oh, so you're not a gallery. So sitting together, really randomly again, on the terrace, we wrote a manifesto, and I was really against writing a manifesto before you actually become someone or something. But we needed to write it down to actually really underline that we're doing that in a way with the best intentions, in a way with no idea where we're going to place ourselves in a couple of years, but with the idea of defining an alternative for contemporary design. And I'll tell you a little bit where this idea or this intention was coming from. Because there's a fantastic book called The So-Called Utopia of the Centre Beaubourg by Luca Frey. He is a Swiss artist. And I mean, this is Beaubourg, which is basically the area where the epicenter of culture, the Centre Pompidou, was built. And that was before. It was basically, it was actually kind of poor people environment, you know, like it's, and they basically tore it down entirely. I'll show you a picture here. In order to put this on the ground. So what they did is they forced a lot of people to move and allowed other people to come in and to produce culture. And it's a beautiful building. It's built by Renzo Piano. The building was the whole manifestation of cultural production. It was an epicenter, or it's still an epicenter in a way, and it was quite groundbreaking back then. And they put a lot of money into it. They put a cinema into it. They put the library into it. But the interesting part is who's selecting the people who are part of the culture, who can be or is allowed to make culture. And it's really maybe the fact of, is it the degree that brings you to become an artist or a designer, or is it your will to create culture? And in this book, and it's a really interesting book because Luca Frey, what he did is he didn't write it, he found that book. It was a book that was written in the time when the Centre Pompidou was built. And he's depicting of a writer, which is a French sociologist called Albert Meister. He's depicting in this book the whole idea of what would be if this is the Centre Pompidou, but we built an alternative place for culture. 54 levels underground, non-architectural, non-governmental, non-structural, non-political. A place for everyone to come to produce culture. And it's so beautiful to read this book because it really questions all the things that we defined. Why? Think about the opening times that an institution has, 10 to 6. Everyone needs to make money between 10 and 6. So there's a limited amount of people who actually go to a museum or go to a gallery or can engage with culture because it has so many limitations in a way. Or also the fact that why do we have walls, you know? Or the first investment that a cultural institution has, we need chairs, we need tables. That's millions of dollars or any kind of currency that goes into in a scenography or a structure that then just leads you in a direction where you don't know if culture or what you want to produce is needing it, you know? So it's really the question of who can maybe be the person or the context of the people, or let's ask the people who produce the culture to define how it's run. And that's the whole story of the so-called Utopia of the Centre Beaubourg. where it's beautiful written. Even in this book, Pontus Hilton himself, who was the first director of the Centre Pompidou, he was defined as a person who actually preferred to be in the underground, he said, upstairs, you know. And it's a beautiful book that was, I wouldn't say the static one, but it was something that subconsciously maybe was there in our brains, thinking we would like to run something where it's not clear if I'm a director. Still, you know, in the system that we are in at the moment, the team that we're running, Depot Basel, some people call me a director, some people say, jokingly, you're a CEO or you're a curator, whatever, you know. But at the end, we're running. It's an operation that we're running without necessary definitions. So yeah, just to give you an impression of Depot Basel in the first 1.5 to 2 years. And I have to say we've been very lucky because we convinced the city of Basel to give us the space entirely for free. Which obviously it's beautiful and it's overwhelming and it's nice, it's a great start, but it's 850 square meters. Even if you want to just hoover the space, you know, it takes you 2 days, you know, pretty much. So, and it's very cold. The infrastructure doesn't work because it's freezing. It's freezing in the summer and it's freezing in the winter, pretty much. And that's the energy that we have. It's exactly what we wanted, you know. And it's quite interesting because for the show that I'm doing now for Chamber, you know, you see us and us, you know, who just contributed with a beautiful job to the show. And you have a lot of people who've defined the cultural context in the art and design world. You have Thomas Alonso sitting here, or a great curator from the Apple Arts Center in Amsterdam. So, unfortunately, a space like that was something that we couldn't handle for long. So we were looking for a really, really long time for an alternative space, because we always said we are a place for contemporary design. That means that it can happen anywhere. We just go with our infrastructure and with the people that are involved in the project into a space or into a place, and then we use all the tools that we have at hand or we have generated, all our depot, to generate this project. So in between we were looking and looking and we couldn't find something, and then a fantastic man gave us this space for 1 Swiss franc, symbolically. Because he was the owner of the... Yeah, Stefan is looking like, really? Because we really wanted to show something or do another show during Art Basel, but we didn't want to settle down for long term, and we really wanted to have a space that we would define and really reconstruct ourselves. So this was an office building in the harbor. It was a ground floor, and we did a show called Craft and Drawing, where we asked designers to be draftsmen. Yeah. And eventually, in 2013, after a really long search, and I even remember that Laura Prager, my co-founder, she was trying to convince me to take the space, and I was not so convinced in the beginning, because you have to imagine it's an old bureau de change, which is nice, it's beautiful symbolically for us. We are somehow the bureau de change, you know, we want to change the system. But it was pretty ugly when we got it, you know, it was, the floor looked really terrible, and the inside needed a lot of refurbishment. There was a huge counter, and obviously you have the safety glass here, you know, you can basically shoot for it and nothing is going to happen. And we went down from 850 square meters to 775, which is quite a jump. But what we really wanted is visibility, because previously we've been in a beautiful silo that was very cold and was very far away, and suddenly we are across a tram station that gives us a possibility to generate or construct exhibitions that are visible 24/7. And during this whole discussion, and I'm really glad that Moritz actually is here himself, because he lives in New York since half a year and is going to stay another year, we started to think about this idea to develop a scenography system. Because, I mean, I just know a lot of museums, and we work with a couple of museums, from the Vitra Design Museum to the Arts and Crafts Museum. They construct scenography, they trash it afterwards, because storage is much more expensive than actually trashing it or rebuilding something. So for us it was really important when we contacted our foundation to really generate something that we can appropriate and use for long term, that we would define or develop a scenography system that we did with the scenography studio Emil and with Moritz that sits over there, with the idea that it could be vertical and horizontal, system that can be applied in any location, not just this location, but we travel with that also to Poland or to the Detroit Design Museum. And that allows us different methodologies of display. And that's how it looks. And like that. So, the big question, how does it look today? It's going to be probably changing in the next 3 weeks or even 2 months because we are quite dynamic in our organization. But in a way, Rebecca, who is the former right hand of Lars Miller from the publishing house, Simon Grossen, who is our accountant, who also works with the Kunstkredit in Basel. We have assistant at the moment from Heidi Franke, who is a master student at the Master Studio in Basel, who is a great person to work with, and Nela Weber, who works for an architectural firm, and Annalena Werner, who's doing the translations. And then we have a board, because the most important thing is because we are technically an association. You need always people who advise you. And I mean, this is the maybe 8 people that are officially on paper, the people who advise us, but there's obviously a lot of people more that do that along the way. But you need to have people in the advisory board who have a certain goal and some sort of definition. So Laura, as a co-founder, she is the head of the board, and Aline Piet, she is involved in We Make It. It's basically a Kickstarter venture, but a Swiss one, and she was involved in building it up. So she's a great reference to work with. And Veronica Gombert, she's an industrial designer, because within the board meetings we always need someone who's documenting the whole process. So she's doing that, and she's also from Basel, so she has a lot of connections in the city itself. Because I'm myself actually not from Basel, which is always good to rely on all the people that are actually from the same city that you work in. Dario Conrad is an entrepreneur. He runs a design firm in Lausanne. Vera Sacchetti is previously at Decrit, and she's a design crit now. Jenny Schmidt, she works in communication for the whole university campus, new university campus. Agatha Novotny is a sociologist who works in design. And Christian Moore works for Vitra. So this is the girls' club plus 2 boys. So just to explain you briefly a couple of things that we've been doing. So for the first show that we did, we covered 9 designers. Exactly what I told you before. Who's deciding the infrastructure? And it's quite interesting because everyone still thinks in these generic structures. So with this workshop of 10 days with 9 designers, where we said then, please be in dialogue with the space and think about what you would produce to us, to make us run a place for contemporary design. And unfortunately, you can't get that out of the brains of people. So we got, this generic desk for the entry area, and we also got a generic wardrobe, which was interesting for us to see that we, by challenging them, they would still define the same things, the same system that you would apply in any kind of museum or institution. But what we did from early beginning, we really wanted to develop our own content. So in the front you can see, based on Enzo Mari's Autoproiezione from 1974, the idea of a self-manufactured, self-applied, open-source furniture. And we asked a couple other designers, in this case Christian Horisborger from Zurich, to answer with his own definition. On the other hand, you see Judith Zeng's performance videos. We kind of showed her the first time in Basel, and then 2 years on, she did this huge performance piece at the Design Miami in the main floor. And this is an initiative that I think is really interesting, and also I think lasts in 6 years or 7 years even. It's called In Residence. It's from Turin, and they're also nourishing the dialogue between the designers and the people who become designers in the future. Also, we really work in different disciplines, like from photography, from obviously production of physical items, to dialogue. So with that, for example, we did a series of photographies that we call personal content, because on one hand it's the personal content within the box of 2 by 2 meters. On the other hand, it's the personal content when you are able to scenograph or assemble your work for the outside world by yourself. So we did a series of, I think, 9 portraits with 9 designers in this cubicle, and I traveled with a still life photographer, I think for 4 weeks or something like that, we were whole of Europe in a van. It's quite good, but it's quite challenging, obviously. And it was quite interesting also to see that once we developed a theme or a reoccurring theme with our program. So as you saw, it was craft and stenography. Then we made craft and drawing, as I referred before, where we asked designers to not just show the work, but also make a reference piece in form of a drawing or a painting. Or at some point, craft and bling bling, because I've never been naturally in jewelry, but Laura, the co-founder, she did the training as a design and an object and jewelry maker. So we really tried always to challenge the idea of not sticking to one formula of design, but really try as much as possible. And for us it was really interesting that we gave all of them a budget to produce something. And it's not common in the jewelry context to get a budget. You know, you would never get some sort of fee to produce work. So for them it was quite interesting to do that. And as you can see, we built a move in. I mean, we had this idea that it would be nice that you actually enter our space and you would just see the black cube, and then you would actually enter a jewelry box, and that's what we actually did. That this perception that you would actually enter the preciousness of a blue velvet-like jewelry box. And we called it bling bling because it was some kind of ironism also behind it that we thought would be nice to apply. Just to give you an example, because I think it's a really, really smart piece. Yinhe is Chinese, and she comes from an area where on the black market they would sell Malaysian jade. Have you heard about Malaysian jade? I've never heard about Malaysian jade before. It's a perky pie, like you would say in East London. It's a lie, basically. It doesn't exist. Because what they did is there was somewhere around the 80s, someone developed this idea of Malaysian jade just to make people invest into something. But it was never worth anything, you know. So in the context of an exhibition called Craft Bling Bling Fake, was the undertitle. It was interesting that she didn't went and produced work by herself, but she picked this bangle from this market that she paid $8 for, but actually on this little label it says that the value of it is $294. So it's exactly this kind of shift of showing how society is able to generate a belief, you know, a belief in investment or value. And she also did just a piece at the Design Academy that you should look at, because it's really about copying and the reproduction. For someone as a designer coming from China, working in Europe, it's quite interesting how she shifts from the jewelry maker to a very conceptual producer in a way. And as Molly was referring to it, I really love talk shows or any kind of popular entertainment. And I don't know if you know it, but you have this show called Blind Date. When I was an immigrant from Poland and we arrived in Germany, it was called Herzblatt. And it's basically, and my dad loved it. I never knew and understood why my dad would love that. But it's basically 3 people sit on one side, and there's a wall in between, and then there's another person. I don't know, a man looks for a woman, or a woman looks for a woman, or whatever. But obviously, it's in a very romantic context. It's about the personal fascination that you have to someone. And I always wondered when I went to all these meetings and talked to so many people, how much is the charm and to be charmed an actual point of generating an assignment or getting the job or whatever, So I thought when we were asked by the Victoria and Albert Museum to contribute with a talk, I said, okay, I like a talk. I like also to listen to other people to talk. But I was really thinking, how can we use this formula of the talk by, because you obviously want to share information, but how can you generate it into something much more entertaining? And that's why we did Design Day. So you can see here, Brent Jacorius, who used to work for Philips de Pury, who runs a production company for design at the moment. You have Hilda Hellström, a designer from Denmark, Salle Studio, who are London-based, and Marion van Albo. And basically, it's a whole system as the dating show. Brent comes in, he asks a couple of questions that are obviously professionally related, and all of them have to answer. And based on the charm or the content or whatever they said, he would choose one of them to go for lunch. We gave him a £50 lunch voucher, and actually he started to talk to some of them, to work with him. It could have happened without us, of course, but it's really about how you put this element of show and entertainment, also during a week like London Design Festival. What are you going to say to the people that have 1 hour time, 1 hour's time to see or look at the talk? So that's how we have tried to apply existing mechanisms and appropriating them into something that we find interesting to share with everyone. Back to collaborative work that I haven't really mentioned so much yet, I think. When I was at the Jan van Eyck, I'm really happy that there's even people from, I mean, it's so interesting because there are so many people that I used to work with, or studied with, will probably work with, working currently with. So this play was a research that I did during my post-academic year at the Jan van Eyck. And at some point I was really stuck and I really was not interested in compiling the research by myself. So instead of compiling it myself, I suggested to Depot Basel, to everyone else, why don't we just use my research and put it in the context of our window displays, the question how you show, how you present, what are the methodologies, and bring a couple designers into my studio, and we generate a book in 5 days. I know, it was stupid to think that, but it really worked. They came on Sunday evening to my house, they looked at the Dropbox, we made the structure, and we designed it in 2 days, we printed it in 2 days, and it was there. Riso printed 120 pages, 100, an edition of 100, and we did it with 6 people, and an intern that helped us binding them. But it's really about, the interesting thing is, I'm not sure if it would have taken longer if you would have more time, because at the end, with a creative process, you make a first decision, and usually it's the same decision that you would take 5 weeks later. It's just you have to train yourself to make quick decisions. Not saying that you do it. I'm not saying that it's the key to do it. I'm just saying it's a possible way of acting in the creative field. Back to being very open and collaborative. I used to do the graphic design. I mean, the logo is developed by Deutsche Nepana, a studio from Germany. But at some point we realized that we want to be more independent and be quicker, because that's what happens when you work with a chain of people that are not as reactive as we want them to be. So I started to appropriate the graphic design they defined for us, which was always good and always big. But eventually I decided a long time ago that I don't want to do it because it takes a lot of time, that I could invest in something else. So we started to do that. We completely started to ignore the graphic design that we had. We let other people to decide it. So this is, for example, an example of Isabel Seifert from Zurich, who designed our A5 program, which necessarily doesn't have so much to do with our graphic design, apart from the fact that the logo is the same. Just to make you understand how we're really starting to open up as a depot, as a network of people. And that's how network came in. Instagram. I mean, Instagram takeaways is the most common system that is used to communicate quick and generate an audience and attention for the whole world, pretty much. But also that's another system that I have to take care of, or Rebecca, or someone else that is much closer to the general operations. So even that we started to give away, and now we're inviting every 7 days one person, and we're paying them. It's called network, So we thought, okay, we give them a fixed amount. It's 7 days. It's 2 posts a day, based on this invoice, and we generate with their own knowledge something on a topic that we. So basically, I'm curating it. I'm giving them a specific assignment of content, and they respond to it in a way. And for that, we're generating some sort of exhibition online.
I like the custom typography there.
Say that again?
The custom typography.
This one?
No, up top.
But it's a generic Instagram one, no?
This is design.
It is definitely design, but it's definitely I just took a screenshot of it this morning. You are not an Instagram user, are you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And I want to talk you through for one project vividly, that you understand how we process assignments. So for example, when Vitra Design Museum came to us and asked us if we want to generate an exhibition next to the Bauhaus exhibition that they just did last year, we came up with the idea of form for an attitude. And as you might know, Laszlo Novoly-Nagy always said that design is an attitude and not a profession. So we thought we're going to respond with that. We're working with 24 designers and 24 projects the designers made. And as you can see, we convinced them that we're going to use the same scenographic system that we developed with Moritz and Emil in the space. And instead of bringing the physical work, we printed everything on cardboard. And obviously on the picture it looks really that the objects are still present, and actually in the physical space it still appeared like the objects are present. But we were in a situation where we realized we don't have enough budget to bring the designers over. And I mean, the worst thing is that you make an exhibition that lasts for half a year and the designers don't see them themselves. So we thought we use that budget and bring them all over through a series of weekends that I will explain in a minute. And through that we can generate, make an exhibition that is bringing the content, but the designers will be naturally part of it. So here you can see the guy who was actually looking after the building, that we asked if he can photograph him, because in a way it's very essential that in an exhibition the person is vivid or present. So on the right side you can see a lot of survey results that we generated together with the designers. We helped beforehand because we really asked ourselves, what does the generic person that comes to Vitra would like to know about contemporary design? And I'm not talking about the area of the EAMS. I'm not talking about the area of the people that Vitra Design Museum or Vitra the furniture company presents. But I'm really talking about the area of now, of the people who finished their formal education the last 5 to 7 years. So what we did is we really asked them questions like, oh, I have to jump through. So we really asked them questions like, what are the most common outcomes of your work? And displayed it, you know, or what are the actually generic working hours that you work, you know? And then we defined an estimate with two researchers, just to make really a strong statement of them to understand what the designer these days is actually producing and how does the designer these days is actually working in. On the other hand, we were really interested in the opinion of people. Because it's really interesting that when you are yourself as a curator in a show, you can generate feedback. You can understand your audience much more. You can generate a feedback for quality or criticism, and then you can also argue for it. But you can't in a show of half a year that is not around us. So what we did is we designed a machine that would run you through 10 questions, so we could at the end understand the audience and how the audience would understand our work. And as I said, a big part of it was for a half a year. We generated a format that was called forum. We're still doing the forums. So we brought all the designers, and we had an open call to a forum, which would mean that they would arrive on the first evening, we would all have dinner, and then for 3 days we would work on different assignments together. We would go for a walk, we would do lunches, we would basically work together like, or you read about Black Mountain College or Bauhaus era, where there was really the conversation at the table. And that's what we basically did. And this is quite a nice picture because Pablo Calderon Salazar, he is from South America, he's a very smart man, and he was reading a book, I suddenly can't think about it, it's called, I can't think about it, but I'll maybe think about it later, but it's, I don't know, but it's the theater of oppressed. It's a book that shows from a director from South America how mechanism of movement and performance can change the society system. But I will think about it later. It will come to my head later on, for sure. So that's how one of his gatherings basically looked like in our space. And as you can see here, this is the second chair that another designer developed for us from Switzerland that he's still sitting on. It's might be comfortable, but it especially makes you sit very straight. So the last thing that I really want to show you, because we have generated about, I don't know, 80 projects with different partners over the last years. But one big thing is our website. We've been so busy with generating so much content and so much dialogue that we've never always been pretty much neglecting the online format, you know. And in this whole discussion about the museum and how the museum or an institution should show themselves online, we really started to think of how we would like to be seen. And then it was obvious, a depot. I mean, this is the icon that Deutsch and Japan designed for us years and years ago, but we've never really appropriated. It's basically a symbol that presents the silo itself from the depot. And in a way, I said to Luke Archer, who is actually British, but he lives in Lausanne, who's actually teaching at Yale, beginning of the year. So when I came actually to talk to Chamber in March, I had a meeting with Luke Archer, which was perfect in its constellation. But the whole idea is basically that we took the whole element of the icon and we manifested in a grid. So it's basically this kind of syntax, Mark Kramer's designed system of a Tumblr, that you have a lot of pictures that kind of, the content that goes like by date from the top to below, and that you can use actually this strategically to, wait, I hope the video works exactly, because you can see the whole content like that, and then you can see the dates, but only as a picture. On the right side, you can still see, you have a second timeline, which we are still working on, but the idea is that some of the projects that are overlapping with each other, that when you click here, that all the projects that are under projects that are connected to craft and think and fake, or to the window display or seats, will be enlightened. So it's really about connecting all your content and making a grid or a matrix that makes sense entirely for the person that looks at it. I don't know if that works actually, but he said that he made a video. Okay, technically there's a video where you also understand that if you have text, more text, or if you have just images, that also the scroller, that we know all from Skyscanner or Kayak, basically enlarges the content or makes it much smaller. So you have some sort of dynamic level within the website. Here it goes. So this is a little bit how the scroller works like. And also, we want to really underline the contributors. So we're generating one of his blogs for all the people that worked with us in the past, or in the present, or in the future. And we're really trying to, and we have a survey. We send them a survey, so they ask a couple of questions that will present them from a perspective that we find amusing, but also relevant in a way. And also, we're transforming the Depot Basel to Depot for Contemporary Design. We will keep both identities, but at the end of the question of us founding ourselves and calling ourselves Place for Contemporary Design, where everyone always says, what is a place for contemporary design? I think it was a natural transformation where we now would say that we are Depot for Contemporary Design. And as you can see here, we have 3 content systems. One is really about all the formats that we've all developed, and the second one is really about the vocabulary, the shop, the process, the prop, and the generic things like all the places that we always worked at, the service, the partners, opinion, newsletter, frequent asked questions. So that's the Depot for Contemporary Design. Now we go to Chamber. Chamber is a gallery that is actually pretty much close. It's probably about a 10-minute walk. I got an email from Juan Garcia Mosqueda, I think December last year. And I read that email, and it's one of his times, you know, it's end of the year, you don't want to make any decisions, you're looking forward to the roast and to have your family over. And I looked at the profile, and I thought it's really, really interesting, and it's definitely something that I really wanted to go back to. Because when we started Depot Basel, we were producing a lot of physical objects, and I like the physicality of, you know, the physical manifestation of something. You can write a text, and a text can explain you a lot, but you can produce a product, and you have so many levels of interpretation in it, and you can look at it from so many sides. So I looked at it and I thought it was really interesting, and I came in March, and I agreed, and I started to think. And I started to think about how all over the last years, design also changed for me from being a student, being a designer, a trained designer actually, shifting towards a much more leading or content generating position, or a position where I generate opportunities mostly for others. I really thought, what did really change for me, also historically when I look at everything? And then I had a great conversation with my friend Matylda Krzykowski, who's a Polish designer from Warsaw, who was actually grown up in France. And she kept on telling to me, but you always refer to Richard Hamilton about how he, in 1956, he was making this collage for this exhibition called This Is Tomorrow, the Whitechapel Gallery. And I always had this fascination of it because it's some sort of sociological report. It's a manifestation of our times in the picture. But obviously all these objects still, they were existing because he grabbed a lot of magazines, mainly American magazines, being British, and he cut them out, and he pasted them together into a physical or fictional space with the idea to show all the objects and all the things that were desired. And it's true, it was post-war America, you know. I mean, you have the Tootsie Pop, you have the Spam Ham, the Tin Spam Ham, you have she's actually American artist who, next to her art, was working as a pin-up, and he is American bodybuilder, but he actually has a Polish surname. This is Young Romans, one of his publications that was super popular in these times during the 50s, 60s. I mean, sorry, is this real? A Hoover with that cord? Doesn't exist. Sorry, there's no such, there's no invention that can suck so much dust from such a distance. Obviously, you have the technical gear, and you have the really patterned carpet, and it's one of these pictures that you stare and look at forever and ever, and you see so much that says about society. But the frustrating part as a curator is you will never have an exhibition in one picture. It's not going to happen. I mean, even if you decide to make it a frontal, maybe then, okay, possibly, but knowing that I will manifest or a series of objects, of products, and gather them in the gallery space, I really was desiring myself to put it into a context or referring to it where you would look at Hamilton and refer it to the day. And the crazy thing is, I work in the contemporary context because I want to talk to the people I work with. I mean, I don't know what Richard Hamilton would say if I would tell him that I'm using him as a reference. He maybe likes it, maybe he doesn't like it, and he will never answer. But I use it as a reference and took the beginning of what he said in his title, just what is it, and appropriated for the show, for the first of 4 shows that is opening now on Thursday. And why? Because I really think that we shifted very much, because back then it was engineers who would produce this work that you see. It shifted. Now it's designers that produce furniture. We know those people. We don't know where they come from. We can read about them. There's some sort of connection to the identity that makes us also invest or buy into them, which is interesting to see. And that's also why the gallery is so important for design these days, because a lot of designers in the process of working with Chamber, I really realized that they want to work with a gallery because they would like to work in a much more experimental context, and they would like to do something that is much more sculptural, much more abstract, and maybe can be generated once or twice or maybe 3 times. So yeah, this is basically the whole starting point of this collection that will be referring to the methodology of collage. Of course, sorry. And that's how the space basically looks like when it's empty. And there's a little text that I don't necessarily have to read out, but please come on Thursday or any other day until the 3rd of December to read it yourself. Wow. I'm just going to give you 4 examples of work that we are presenting in the current show. That were just photographed by Lauren Coleman, who's a brilliant magician when it comes to lighting and drama within the space. So this is an existing work that I choose because it's awesome. Also, it's a Canadian. He's Canadian, she's Dutch. They worked there. They met during the studies, and what they did is they have this huge fascination between technology and aesthetics. And with this, it's called, I never know how to pronounce it. It's not syzygy, but syzygy? Syzygy, exactly, syzygy. And this is the work that they produced called Phases. And what it does, it mimics the movement between sun and moon. So you have to imagine this is a rotator, this is a belt generated, like it's a belt, it generates the movement of a piece. It has a lot of filters and it has a lot of layers. I believe that this is the sensor that detects if it's daylight or if it's not daylight. And then you have this little thing that you can't see so much, but you can see it there, that basically turns around and shows you 12 phases of the day. So basically it has to go through twice to show you just a whole day. And it's quite beautiful because it mimics basically time without being a clock. But in a way they say themselves that it's a clock. And I like this idea in the context of just what is it, because it is time in a way, but it's a transformation of time in a complete abstract level. And that's why Oscar and Sophie are in the show. Wow. And then Nick Hendricks, who's a painter actually that Carissa and I know from the Jan van Eyck. He's quite obsessive when it comes to his work, because he's really one of the people in Holland that is asked always to go to all these panels and knowledgeably talk about painting, not just contemporary painting, but really the history of painting. And for me it was always interesting to think about the gallery not as a place for solely show design or art, but maybe to define some sort of tension between both disciplines. And Nick made 3 so large paintings that when they arrived, Sandra Nutt, who was also actually a previous Decred student, sent me a picture and wrote on WhatsApp, "It's so big." Because I don't even know the measurements from the top of my head, but it's probably 2 meters 40 by 3. And it's really, it covers the whole wall. But Nick is really interested in this layering and this method of collage. So he picked a lot of pictures from the internet that would refer onto society, onto history. So you have Rubens, a picture of Rubens, and then you have the mosquito as the start of life. You have, how do you call it, from the window. I had this same moment already today. When you have a window and then you have the shutters. A shutter? Yeah. Really? Okay. The shutter of a historic window. So the nice thing about this work is that we have 3 of them in the show, and you're standing in front of it, and you just have so much time to absorb it. And even if you don't know what it actually is, you can still look at it and stare at it for such a long time, because it's images that you eventually recognize from the history. So in that context, as a painting, as a collage, I think it's very suitable piece for the show. And Mirka Lara Severa is actually also here. She sits here. I only have 2 pictures of them. I don't have the pictures of the 3rd piece. But her work is called Still Life. She's a photographer that I worked with a couple of years ago. And she developed this light box specifically for chamber with the idea of being very connected to advertisement in a way. And all the elements that you see here, and there's a 3rd one that shows prosthetic breasts, because also this is a prosthetic hand and a prosthetic foot. So she's really shifting between, this fakeness and realness of our body parts, but also, as for me, it's a female element almost that I would refer to when you see basically Hamilton's work, or you have a female persona. I really wanted to have something that manifests a female persona in the current collage that is now presented at Chamber. And also about the question, how do we live? How do you want to live? I had this long conversation with Martina, but you know how it is when you work with designers. And eventually they're going to do something by themselves, in the direction they want to work in. So I asked Martina to really rethink the bin. Why does bins have to be always so terrible looking? We're hiding them. We're putting them somewhere in the corner. We don't want to have them as part of our daily lives. So from the idea of making some sculpture, a huge object, he went down and made a series of really beautiful bins that we also have at show. Obviously, from a curator perspective, I wanted to have something much more exaggerated and much more extreme, but I still think that the whole context of what the show needs, it's still working very beautifully with bin it. So the big question is, how does the result look like? And also the challenge of obviously working with other people is, that the guys who made the collage, and I mean, I showed them the pieces. I was there when they started to work with the piece, but obviously some of the objects are not in the right perspective, but so wasn't, I mean, Hamilton's collage was also not defined in the right perspective. You know, the proportions were wrong in so many levels. But this is the collage that for the first show, Billers Club have made, where you can see the whole assembly of all the work present at the gallery. And obviously we're working on 3 more shows and 3 more collages that we're going to discuss in the next days. So that's going to be a good thing to do. So I don't know how I made it because I naturally can't feel my throat, but yeah, I'm done. And if you have any questions, ask me, because I'm much better in a direct conversation. Thank you so much for your attention.